Welcome back to your new community, Trinity Grace. We are taking a break from Matthew's Gospel, and we're turning to John's Gospel for Advent. We're going to work through John chapter 1, verses 1 to 18. And in those 18 verses are just rich, just dense, and just full of as much beauty that can be packed into a sunrise or a sunset. Just that much truth and beauty in those 18 verses about God and Jesus Christ, and speaking to the specific context of Jesus coming to this earth. And so that's why we're turning to this passage for the season of Advent. If you're not familiar with Advent, the word literally means coming, and we are celebrating two Advents. We are celebrating Jesus's first Advent, the Christ's first Advent, coming to this earth some 2,000 years ago to do what he did, to be God incarnate and to complete God's work of redemption on the cross and through the empty tomb, or at least that part of God's plan of redemption. And we are perhaps celebrating isn't the perfect word. We are longing for, we are pining perhaps even, for Christ's second advent. We believe that Jesus, he ascended back to heaven to be seated at the right hand of God, the Father, and he is waiting for the Father's signal to return to this earth, to consummate history, and to usher in his final perfected kingdom. So, I hope you're looking forward to the next few weeks. Come to think of it, perhaps as a new community, you might not be able to study all the verses together, because I'm guessing you'll probably break at some point before Christmas. I'll let your groups discuss that what week you will meet up until. Well, Matt did a wonderful job kicking us off in this Advent series, and we're entitling this series First Light. I think that's a fair and an apt description of some of the themes that John touches on in those first 18 verses of his gospel. And Matt did a wonderful job of taking us back to the beginning and showing us how John is connecting Jesus back to the beginning. And I really appreciated Matt's introduction, and he lent us just the whole metaphor of just being on this mountaintop and having this breathtaking, renewing, life-giving perspective that comes when you are up so high. And he likened John chapter 1, verses 1 to 18 as a mountaintop in Scripture. Not so many explicit practical to-dos or how-tos, but if we camp out in John chapter 1 and just let these grand, just epic descriptions of Christ sink in, they are powerful to give us perspective, much needed perspective on our day-to-day life. And so I want to offer you just a few questions to approach the text with tonight. And hopefully you can think back to Matt's message to help discuss these questions. But the first question is this: what characteristics of Jesus' divinity does John describe in chapter 1, verses 1 to 5? In those short 5 verses, John, he packs in a lot, and there's a lot there to chew on, and he speaks to Christ's divinity. So I hope you can identify Just myself, glancing at the passage, there are about 3 to 4, maybe even a few more divine characteristics of Christ there. Next, after you identify a divine characteristic as it comes up in your study, take time to ask the following questions of each characteristic. So first, after you identify a characteristic, consider the fact that this divine characteristic is wrapped up in humbled human flesh, meaning Jesus, Son of God, divine Son of God, now finds himself incarnate, in flesh. So Jesus as human babe and growing up to become a man. So what wonder does that stir in your heart? The hope that I have for every human being, you included, myself included, is that Christ would fill our hearts with wonder. And just the wonder of Christ would be a worship of Christ, and his grace going deep into the recesses of our soul and transforming us truly from the inside out. And so the Christ follower, certainly their eyes are opened up to be in wonder of Christ. Next, and it's an application-oriented question, how can this divine characteristic encourage us in our day-to-day life of faith? How can this divine characteristic encourage us in our day-to-day life of faith? Even, to borrow Matt's analogy, a refreshing vacation in the mountaintops, it's meant to help us go back to everyday life, to face our job, the deadlines, just the everyday stresses. Similarly, these divine characteristics of Jesus are not just there for us to theologize about and to pontificate and to sound smart as we talk about these things. No, even Jesus' divine characteristics are there. He is who he is because he wants to bless us in our everyday life. So how can this divine characteristic encourage us in our day-to-day life of faith? And finally, which characteristic particularly gives you hope in your life today? I hope you can share that with your group there, and hopefully one of these divine characteristics of Christ really resonate with you and speak to where you're at in your life. And perhaps related to that, you can share just how you can be prayed for, how your little spiritual family there can be supporting you in prayer. Well, I hope that helps to just get started on this conversation. So have a great time meditating on Christ. God bless you. Bye.